They laughed at my accent like it was a joke. The boardroom full of executives thought my small-town southern drawl was entertainment, something to whisper about behind manicured hands. Little did they know, the man sitting quietly in the corner, the one they were all desperately trying to impress, would soon stand up and respond to me in perfect, fluent French, German, and Spanish. This is how my biggest insecurity became my greatest strength. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Caroline, and 6 months ago I was that girl everyone underestimated because of how I talked. You know the type. Thick southern accent, words that stretched like molasses, pronunciations that made city folks smirk behind their coffee cups. I'd grown up in a tiny town in rural Georgia where everybody talked like me, where my accent was as normal as sweet tea on a summer day. But when I moved to New York City for my dream job at a prestigious marketing firm, I quickly learned that the way I spoke was seen as a liability. The job itself was everything I'd worked toward through college and graduate school. I had the credentials, the portfolio, the passion for creative marketing campaigns that could change how people saw brands. My ideas were solid, my work ethic unmatched, and my creativity had professors back in Georgia calling me their star student. But none of that seemed to matter when I opened my mouth in those gleaming Manhattan conference rooms. It started on my very first day. I was introducing myself to the team, explaining my background and my excitement about joining their innovative marketing campaigns. I could see it happening in real time. The subtle eye rolls, the barely concealed smirks, the way conversations seemed to pause when I spoke. My supervisor, Patricia, was polite enough, but I caught her exchanging glances with other team members whenever I presented my ideas, as if my accent somehow made my concepts less valid. The worst part wasn't the obvious mockery. It was the way people would suddenly start speaking slower to me, as if my accent meant I couldn't understand complex concepts. They'd explain basic marketing principles like I was a child, their voices dripping with condescension. During brainstorming sessions, I'd watch my ideas get dismissed with barely a glance, only to see them resurface weeks later from someone else's mouth, suddenly brilliant when delivered in a crisp New York accent. I tried everything to fit in. I spent hours watching YouTube videos on accent reduction, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror until my jaw ached. I bought expensive clothes that looked like what the other women wore, traded my comfortable flats for heels that made my feet scream by lunchtime. I changed my hair, my makeup, even the way I held my coffee cup. But every time I opened my mouth, that familiar drawl would slip out, and I'd see the same dismissive looks cross their faces. The breaking point came during our biggest client presentation of the year. We were pitching to Meridian Industries, a multinational corporation looking to revamp their entire brand identity. I'd worked for weeks on a campaign concept that I knew was brilliant, a strategy that would connect with audiences across different cultural and economic backgrounds. It was innovative, emotionally resonant, and backed by solid research. I was so excited to finally have a chance to prove myself. The presentation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in our main conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Our entire team was there, along with 5 executives from Meridian Industries. They looked exactly like what I'd expected from a major corporation. Sharp suits, expensive watches, the kind of polished professionalism that screams success and money. When it was my turn to present, I stood up with my heart pounding and began explaining my concept. I'd practiced this presentation dozens of times, but as soon as I started talking, I could see it happening again. The subtle smirks, the sideways glances between the Meridian executives. One of them, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, actually covered her mouth like she was trying not to laugh. I pushed through, determined to let my ideas speak for themselves, but I could feel my confidence crumbling with every passing minute. My accent seemed to get thicker the more nervous I became, my words drawling longer despite my efforts to sound more professional. When I finished, the room was uncomfortably quiet except for the polite, lukewarm applause that felt more like pity than appreciation. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After the presentation, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to collect myself before facing the inevitable feedback. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my flushed face and feeling like a complete failure. All those years of education, all the late nights perfecting my craft, all the dreams I'd harbored about making it in the big city, none of it mattered, because I couldn't change the way I talked. When I returned to the conference room, the formal part of the meeting had ended, but the Meridian executives were still there, chatting casually with our team over coffee and pastries. I tried to blend into the background, but I couldn't help overhearing their conversation. They were discussing the presentations, and when they got to mine, I felt my stomach drop. That Southern girl's ideas weren't terrible, one of the male executives was saying, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. But can you imagine having her represent our brand? Our clients are sophisticated, international. We need someone who sounds like they belong in a boardroom, not a barn. The others laughed, and the blonde woman who'd covered her mouth during my presentation added, I kept waiting for her to say y'all, or ask if we wanted some sweet tea. It's like she stepped out of a country music video. Their words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there frozen, feeling tears burn behind my eyes, when I noticed something interesting. There was one person in the group who wasn't laughing, a man I hadn't paid much attention to during the presentation. He'd been sitting quietly in the corner, dressed in a simple but obviously expensive navy suit, with salt and pepper hair and an air of quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. While the others continued their cruel commentary about my accent and background, he was studying something intently on his phone, but I could tell he was listening to every word they said, and there was something in his expression, a tightness around his eyes, a set to his jaw, that suggested he wasn't enjoying their entertainment. The problem with people like that, the blonde executive continued, clearly emboldened by her audience's laughter, is they don't understand that image matters just as much as ideas in our business. Maybe she'd do better at some local company down south where they appreciate that whole folksy charm thing. That's when the quiet man in the corner looked up from his phone. His eyes met mine across the room, and I saw something there that surprised me. Not pity, not amusement, but genuine anger on my behalf. He stood up slowly, and the casual chatter in the room gradually died as everyone turned to look at him. Excusez-moi, he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that I couldn't immediately place. But I couldn't help overhearing your conversation about accents and professionalism. The room fell completely silent. Even I held my breath, unsure where this was going. Je trouve très intéressant que vous parliez de sophistication, he continued in what I now realized was perfect French, quand vous ne semblez pas comprendre que l'intelligence n'a pas d'accent. The Meridian executives looked confused, clearly not understanding what he'd said. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. Ah, forgive me. Let me translate. I said I find it very interesting that you speak of sophistication when you don't seem to understand that intelligence has no accent. The blonde woman's face flushed red. I'm sorry, who are you exactly? She demanded, her voice sharp with embarrassment and irritation. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her with deliberate formality. Marcus Dubois, he said simply. I'm the founder and CEO of Meridian Industries, the company you're hoping to work with. The silence that followed was deafening. Every face in the room went white, and I watched as the reality of what had just happened sank in. The executives who had been laughing at my expense suddenly looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. My own colleague stood frozen, probably calculating how badly this was going to reflect on our firm. Marcus Dubois. I recognized the name now, though I'd never seen his picture. He was famously private, rarely appeared in business magazines, and was known for running his company with an iron fist wrapped in velvet gloves. Meridian Industries was worth billions, with offices in dozens of countries, and here was its founder standing in our conference room after listening to his potential business partners mock one of their employees. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? He asked the group, switching to what sounded like flawless German. When no one responded, he continued in Spanish. Hablan español? No? Que peccato non parlate italiano? Still nothing. He smiled that cold smile again. How unfortunate that you don't speak Italian either. He walked over to where I was standing, still frozen in shock, and extended his hand to me. Ms. Caroline. I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Caroline Thompson. Ms. Thompson, he said, shaking my hand with genuine warmth. I was very impressed by your presentation earlier. Your campaign concept shows a deep understanding of how to connect with diverse audiences, something that seems to be in short supply in this room. Then he turned back to the group of mortified executives. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I speak 6 languages fluently. I've learned that wisdom and creativity come from all corners of the world, in all kinds of voices. Some of my most brilliant employees speak with accents from Alabama, Mumbai, Stockholm, and Sao Paulo. I've found that people who mock others for their speech patterns are usually trying to compensate for their own intellectual limitations. The head of our marketing firm, Mr. Richardson, stepped forward, his face pale but determined to salvage the situation. Mr. Dubois, I assure you that our team has the utmost respect for all our employees. If there was any misunderstanding— Oh, there was no misunderstanding, Marcus interrupted smoothly. I heard exactly what your potential clients think about diversity, creativity, and respect. And I heard how your team allowed one of their most talented members to be ridiculed without saying a word in her defense. He looked directly at me again. Miss Thompson, I'd like to offer you a position with Meridian Industries. We're always looking for creative minds who understand that authenticity and innovation go hand in hand. Your campaign concept was exactly the kind of fresh thinking we need. I felt like the room was spinning. An hour ago, I'd been standing in this same conference room feeling like a complete failure, convinced that my accent would forever hold me back in my career. Now, the CEO of one of the world's most successful companies was offering me a job after witnessing the very prejudice that had been crushing my spirit for months. I don't know what to say, I stammered, acutely aware that my accent was as thick as ever, but somehow no longer caring. Marcus smiled, and this time it was genuinely warm. Say you'll consider it. We can discuss the details later. Right now, I think you should know that your presentation was the only one today that showed real understanding of global market dynamics. The others were competent, but yours was inspired. The Meridian executives who had been mocking me earlier were now shifting uncomfortably, probably realizing that their behavior had just cost them a major contract. The blonde woman who'd made the comment about country music videos looked like she was about to be sick. Marcus gathered his things and headed toward the door, but paused to address the room one final time. I want to leave you all with a thought, he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone listen. In my experience, people who judge others based on how they sound rather than what they say rarely succeed in truly global business. Intelligence, creativity, and integrity. These things aren't diminished by an accent. They're enhanced by the diverse perspectives that different backgrounds bring to the table. He looked at me once more. Miss Thompson, my assistant will be in touch with you tomorrow. I hope you'll seriously consider joining a company that values substance over superficial judgments. And with that, he walked out, leaving behind a room full of people who had just learned a very expensive lesson about the cost of prejudice. As the door closed behind Marcus Dubois, the conference room remained in stunned silence. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, and for a moment I wondered if I had imagined the entire encounter. The same executives who had been laughing at my accent minutes earlier now stood frozen, their faces pale with the realization of what their prejudice had just cost them. Mr. Richardson was the first to break the silence, his voice strained as he tried to process what had just happened. Caroline, he said, turning to me with an expression I'd never seen before, something that looked suspiciously like respect mixed with desperation. That was quite an impressive presentation you gave. I think we should discuss your role here at the firm, perhaps consider some new opportunities. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that nothing had changed about me in the last hour except other people's perception of my worth. My accent was the same, my ideas were the same, my passion for creative marketing was exactly what it had been when I walked into this room. The only difference was that someone with power and influence had validated what I'd always known about myself, that my voice, however it sounded, had value. Thank you, Mr. Richardson, I said, and I could hear the new confidence in my own voice, the way my words carried weight they'd never had before. I appreciate that, but I think I need some time to consider all my options now. The way his face fell told me everything I needed to know about how desperately they wanted to keep me now that Marcus Dubois had shown interest. The Meridian executives were gathering their things, moving with the hurried efficiency of people who knew they'd made a catastrophic mistake. The blonde woman who had made the comment about country music videos approached me, her earlier arrogance replaced by obvious anxiety. "Caroline," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope there are no hard feelings about earlier. Sometimes workplace banter can be taken the wrong way." I studied her face, seeing the fear behind her polite words. She was trying to rewrite history, to pretend that what I'd heard hadn't been deliberate cruelty but some kind of misunderstanding. For months I might have accepted that explanation, might have been grateful that she was even acknowledging me. But something had shifted inside me during that confrontation, something fundamental about how I saw myself and my place in the world. "I don't think there was any misunderstanding," I replied calmly. "I think I heard exactly what you meant to say. The only difference is that now you're worried about the consequences." Her face flushed red again, but she couldn't argue with the truth of what I'd said. After the Meridian team left, I found myself alone in the conference room, staring out at the Manhattan skyline and trying to process everything that had happened. 6 months ago, I'd arrived in the city with such high hopes, convinced that talent and hard work would be enough to overcome any obstacles. The constant undermining of my confidence had been slow and subtle, like water wearing away stone, until I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to believe in myself. But Marcus Dubois had done more than just defend me against those cruel comments. He'd shown me something I'd lost sight of, that my background, my accent, my different way of seeing the world weren't weaknesses to be hidden or overcome. They were strengths that brought unique perspectives to every challenge I faced. That evening, I walked home through the city streets with my head held higher than it had been in months. The same accent that had made me feel self-conscious all day now felt like a badge of honor, a reminder of where I'd come from and how far I'd traveled. I thought about my grandmother back in Georgia, who'd raised me after my parents died, who'd taught me that dignity came from how you treated others, not from how others treated you. Grandma May had always been proud of our family's way of speaking, tracing our accent back through generations of hard-working people who'd built lives with their hands and their hearts. "Caroline," she used to tell me while we sat on her front porch, watching the sun set over the cotton fields, "don't you ever let anybody make you ashamed of who you are. The way you talk carries the voices of everyone who came before you, and that's something to honor, not hide." I'd forgotten that wisdom somewhere between graduate school applications and job interviews, somewhere in the process of trying to mold myself into what I thought success looked like. But Marcus Dubois had reminded me that authenticity was more powerful than imitation, that being genuinely myself was worth more than any pale copy of someone else's idea of professionalism. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find a message waiting for me. Marcus Dubois' assistant had called, as promised, and left detailed information about setting up a meeting to discuss opportunities at Meridian Industries. But more than that, she'd included a personal note from Marcus himself, written in his distinctive handwriting. "Ms. Thompson, true leadership recognizes talent regardless of packaging. I look forward to our conversation about how your unique perspective could benefit our global team." As I sat at my desk, reading that note for the third time, I noticed that my colleagues were treating me differently. The same people who had ignored my contributions for months were suddenly stopping by my cubicle, asking about my weekend plans, complimenting work they'd previously dismissed. It was fascinating and slightly depressing to watch how quickly people's attitudes could change when they realized I might have value they'd overlooked. Patricia, my supervisor, appeared at my desk around 10 o'clock with a coffee and an expression that attempted warmth but mostly conveyed calculation. "Caroline," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I wanted to chat with you about yesterday's presentation. You really knocked it out of the park, and I think it's time we talked about advancing your role here." I looked at her, remembering all the times she'd dismissed my ideas, all the subtle ways she'd made me feel like my contributions didn't matter. "That's interesting, Patricia," I said, leaning back in my chair. "What specifically about yesterday's presentation was different from the work I've been doing all along?" She shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting me to question her sudden change of heart. "Well, you seemed more confident, more polished. I think you're really growing into your potential here." The irony wasn't lost on me that my potential had apparently become visible only after someone else had recognized it first. The meeting with Marcus Dubois was scheduled for the following week at Meridian Industries headquarters, a gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan that spoke of success and global influence. As I prepared for that meeting, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. I wasn't going to try to change my accent or modify my speech patterns. If Marcus Dubois wanted to hire me, he was going to hire the real Caroline Thompson, drawl and all. The day of the meeting, I chose my outfit carefully, not to hide who I was, but to present the best version of myself. I wore a navy blue dress that my grandmother would have called church-appropriate, paired with shoes that were comfortable enough to walk in and professional enough to command respect. I looked in the mirror before leaving my apartment and saw someone I recognized. Not the person I'd been trying to become, but the person I'd always been underneath the doubt and insecurity. Meridian Industries, headquarters, was everything I'd expected, and more. The lobby soared 3 stories high, with marble floors and artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. But what struck me most was the diversity of people moving through that space. Men and women of different ages, ethnicities, and, yes, different accents. I heard conversations in multiple languages, saw confidence that came in many different packages, and realized that this was what a truly global company looked like. Marcus's office was on the 37th floor, with windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. He greeted me personally, not leaving that task to an assistant, and his handshake was as warm and genuine as it had been in that conference room. "Ms. Thompson," he said, gesturing toward a comfortable seating area away from his imposing desk. "Thank you for coming. I hope you've had some time to think about our conversation." "I have," I replied, settling into the offered chair and feeling surprisingly calm. "And I have to admit, I'm curious about why you stepped in the way you did. You could have just ignored what was happening, finished your business, and moved on." Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee from an elegant service set and handed one to me before answering. "That's a fair question," he said, settling back in his own chair. "The truth is, I've been where you were in that room. Not exactly the same circumstances, but I know what it feels like to be dismissed because of something superficial about yourself that has nothing to do with your actual abilities." He told me then about his own journey to success, how he'd immigrated to the United States from France as a young man with big dreams and a thick accent that marked him as an outsider. "The first few years were brutal," he admitted. "People assumed I was less intelligent because of how I spoke English. They thought my ideas were somehow less valid because they came with a French accent. I had professors in business school who would ask me to repeat myself not because they couldn't understand me, but because they enjoyed making me feel foreign and different." "How did you get past it?" I asked, genuinely curious about his path from struggling immigrant to billionaire CEO. "I realized that the problem wasn't with me," he said simply. "The problem was with people who were so narrow-minded that they confused familiarity with competence. I stopped trying to sound like everyone else and started focusing on being better than everyone else. I learned that confidence is the best accent anyone can have." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "When I saw what happened to you in that conference room, I saw myself 30 years ago, but more than that. I saw someone with genuine talent being dismissed for all the wrong reasons. Your presentation wasn't just good, Caroline. It was brilliant. You understood something about global marketing that the others missed entirely." "What was that?" I asked, though I suspected I knew what he meant. "You understood that authenticity resonates across all cultures," he said. "Your campaign concept didn't try to homogenize different markets into one bland, universal message. You recognized that people connect with brands that feel real, that acknowledge their differences while finding common ground. That's incredibly sophisticated thinking, and it came from someone who's been told she's not sophisticated enough." We spent the next 2 hours discussing marketing strategies, global business trends, and the future of authentic brand communication. Marcus didn't just talk at me. He listened to my ideas, asked thoughtful questions, and treated my insights with the respect I'd been craving for months. By the time our meeting ended, I felt like I was talking to a mentor rather than a potential employer, someone who saw not just what I could contribute now, but what I could become with the right opportunities. "I'd like to offer you a position as senior marketing strategist for our global campaigns," Marcus said as our conversation wound down. "It would mean working directly with teams in 12 different countries, developing strategies that respect local cultures while maintaining brand consistency. The salary is triple what you're making now, and there's significant room for advancement." I sat there for a moment, letting the magnitude of what he was offering sink in. 6 months ago, I'd been grateful for an entry-level position at a mid-tier marketing firm. Now, one of the world's most successful businessmen was offering me a senior position at a global corporation. Not despite my background, but because of the unique perspective it gave me. "There's one thing I need to know," I said finally. "This offer, is it because you feel sorry for what happened yesterday, or is it because you genuinely believe I can do the job?" Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and conveyed both amusement and respect. "Caroline, I don't build billion-dollar companies by making decisions based on sympathy. I'm offering you this position because I believe you have the talent, creativity, and authentic perspective that we need. The fact that you've been undervalued by others just means I'm getting exceptional talent at a reasonable price." That afternoon, I walked out of Meridian Industries headquarters with a job offer that would change my life and a new understanding of my own worth. The girl who had been mocked for her accent that morning was now being courted by one of the most successful companies in the world. But more important than the job offer was the realization that I'd been looking for validation in all the wrong places. I thought about calling my grandmother to share the news, imagining her voice crackling through the phone line from Georgia, probably telling me she'd known all along that I was destined for great things. Grandma May had never doubted that my voice, however it sounded, had something important to say. I just needed to learn to believe her. The next day, I submitted my resignation letter to Mr. Richardson, who tried desperately to convince me to stay with promises of promotions and raises that should have been offered months earlier. I was polite but firm, explaining that I'd found an opportunity that better aligned with my career goals and values. "Caroline," she said, forcing another one of those artificial smiles, "what a small world. I heard you're joining Meridian Industries. Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, my accent as thick and proud as ever. "I'm excited about the opportunity to work with a company that values diverse perspectives and authentic voices." Her smile faltered slightly, and I could see her processing the subtle message in my words. 3 weeks later, I started my new position at Meridian Industries, and everything about the experience confirmed that I'd made the right choice. My new colleagues came from dozens of different countries and backgrounds, speaking English with accents from Mumbai to Stockholm to Sao Paulo. In this environment, my southern drawl wasn't unusual or unprofessional. It was just another voice in a chorus of global perspectives. My first major project was developing a campaign for a luxury goods company that wanted to expand into new markets. Instead of trying to create one universal message, I proposed a strategy that celebrated local cultures while maintaining brand consistency. The campaign featured real people from different regions speaking in their natural voices, their authentic accents becoming part of the brand's appeal rather than something to be hidden or minimized. The campaign was a massive success, generating buzz not just for the client but for Meridian Industries' innovative approach to global marketing. Marcus stopped by my office personally to congratulate me on the results, and his pride in my work felt more valuable than any bonus or promotion could have been. "You know," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I've been thinking about what happened in that conference room 6 months ago. Those executives thought they were being clever by mocking your accent, but they revealed something much more damaging about themselves: their complete inability to recognize talent when it didn't fit their narrow expectations." "It's funny how things work out," I replied, looking out my window at the Manhattan skyline that had once seemed so intimidating. "If they hadn't been so cruel, I might never have met you. Their prejudice became my opportunity." "That's the beautiful irony of bigotry," Marcus said thoughtfully. "People who judge others based on superficial characteristics often miss out on the very opportunities they're trying to protect. They're so busy maintaining their sense of superiority that they can't see the talent right in front of them." As my first year at Meridian Industries progressed, I found myself becoming a mentor to other employees who'd faced similar challenges. Young professionals from diverse backgrounds would seek me out, sharing their own stories of being underestimated or dismissed because of their accents, their appearance, or their unconventional paths to success. I'd tell them what I'd learned, that authenticity was more powerful than imitation, that diverse perspectives were business assets rather than liabilities, and that the right opportunities would come to those who refused to diminish themselves to fit into spaces that weren't big enough for their full potential. The company I'd left behind struggled after losing the Meridian Industries contract, eventually downsizing and losing several key clients who'd heard about the incident. Meanwhile, I was thriving in an environment that valued substance over style, creativity over conformity, and authentic voices over artificial polish. Looking back, I realized that those executives in the conference room had done me an enormous favor. though it wasn't one they'd intended. Their cruelty had forced me to confront my own insecurities and make a choice about who I wanted to be. I could continue trying to change myself to fit their narrow definition of professionalism, or I could find places where my authentic self was not just accepted but celebrated. The accent that had once made me feel ashamed became a source of strength, a reminder of my roots and the journey that had brought me to where I was. Every time I spoke in meetings, every time I presented ideas to international clients, every time I heard my grandmother's cadence in my own voice, I was reminded that success didn't require sacrificing who you were. It required finding the courage to be yourself in a world that often rewarded conformity over authenticity. The story that had begun with cruel laughter in a conference room had become a testament to the power of believing in yourself even when others couldn't see your worth. Sometimes the greatest revenge against those who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.